Let's just jump right into this explainer. Today, we're looking at exactly how a 5,000-year-old society engineered solutions to complex urban problems that, honestly, rival modern infrastructure. We're talking about the incredible Indus Valley civilization, and more specifically, its crown jewel, the city of Mohenjo-Daro. Here is our architectural blueprint for today. We'll quickly cover the accidental 1922 discovery, dive into their master planned grid cities, the engineering behind the Great Bath, the world's first drainage system, precision weights and fired bricks, and finally, the end of the engineers. All right, part one, the accidental 1922 discovery. Because before we can really unpack their engineering, we need to know how they were even found. And it's a great story that shows how a literal misstep can rewrite history. Picture this. It's December 1922. Indian archaeologist R.D. Banerjee is out near the Indus River chasing a red-spotted deer into the jungle. He loses the deer, sits down to take a breather, and literally trips over a sharp stone. Well, that stone turned out to be a 4,500-year-old Bronze Age flint scraper. As he's investigating this dense jungle area, he spots a local guy loading baked bricks onto a bullock cart, bricks he was just casually taking to build his own house. Banerjee instantly realized a massive ancient city was sitting right beneath their feet. Match that with some stamps found in Harappa a couple of years prior, and by 1924, the Illustrated London News announced to the world that an entire forgotten civilization had been discovered, one that spanned 1,600 kilometers and housed around 5 million people. Just wild. Moving on to part two, master-planned grid cities. Now this is where their mastery of engineering really starts to show. Think about this number. 90. 5 millennia ago, their main roads ran perfectly north to south, with cross streets intersecting at mathematically precise 90-degree angles. This wasn't a town that just organically, haphazardly grew over time. No, it was master planned from day one. You could look at their street layout and swear you were looking at a modern grid map of Manhattan. But they didn't stop at just laying out roads, they engineered the literal foundation of the city itself. The entire metropolis was built on massive raised platforms. Why? Because they were situated right next to the unpredictable Indus River. They engineered these platforms to survive the intense Sindh floods that sadly still wash away modern villages in that exact same region today. These ancient engineers were thinking centuries ahead. Section 3. Engineering the Great Bath. Let's talk about their absolute crown jewel of water management. This structure was housed up in the upper citadel alongside massive grain silos designed to feed the public during emergencies. To put this thing into perspective, the Great Bath could hold 2,100 liters of water. That is roughly 30 modern rooftop water tanks combined. It was 12 meters long, 7 meters wide, and about 2.5 meters deep, complete with entry stairs. But think about it. Holding that much water creates massive structural pressure. So how did 5,000-year-old walls not just blow out or leak into the surrounding soil? Well, if we deconstruct this pool layer by layer, we see they essentially invented modern waterproofing. First, they laid a perfectly leveled fired brick foundation. Then, step 2, they added a thick layer of gypsum plaster. And finally, the brilliant part, they sealed the whole thing with bitumen, which is a naturally occurring asphalt. They used a watertight hydrocarbon seal 5,000 years ago. That is the exact same basic technique we use in modern waterproofing today. They even engineered a drainage hole at the bottom, hooked up to a massive pipeline to flush the dirty water out to the river. Which leads us perfectly into Section 4, the world's first drainage system. You see, the Great Bath was really just one piece of a much larger puzzle. Their citywide drainage system is just mind-blowing. Every single house, no matter how small, was connected to a covered street drainage system. They actually used those raised platforms of the city to create a perfect gravity flow for the sewage. And get this, they covered the drains with limestone, specifically chosen because it naturally absorbs sewage odors. Plus, they built in actual maintenance manholes at regular intervals to clear out blockages. And their access to fresh water was just as robust. In just the 10% of Mohenjo-Daro that has been excavated so far, an astonishing 700 wells have been discovered. We're talking large public wells plus smaller private ones built directly into people's homes. Some were even elevated to the second floor for convenience. When we compare this 5,000-year-old grid to ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia at the exact same time, the Indus Valley's civil engineering was vastly superior in terms of daily human living. While other civilizations were building incredible massive monuments for their rulers, they completely lacked this kind of advanced, citywide urban sanitation for everyday people. It poses a fascinating question, doesn't it? Why didn't other ancient empires have this level of sanitation infrastructure? Why did these Indus Valley engineers prioritize public health, street grids, and sanitation so heavily while neighboring empires were obsessed with monumental tombs for their pharaohs and kings? It tells us something really profound about their societal values.
All right, Section 5, Precision Weights and Fired Bricks.
This obsession with order wasn't just in the streets, it was deeply baked into their industry and their economy. The crucial takeaway here is their extreme standardization. Look at this tiny number, 0.856 grams. Across the entire civilization, whether you were in Mohenjo-Daro or hundreds of miles away in Harappa, they used standardized stone weights for trade. The smallest weight was perfectly calibrated to exactly 0.856 grams. The most common weight was 13.7 grams, which is exactly the smallest weight multiplied by 16. That kind of universal standardization proves they had a highly regulated, very serious economic system. And their domestic engineering was just as precise. They engineered double-story houses with climate-controlled walls. The outside wall was made of baked brick for structural strength, but the inside wall was made of mud brick to keep the interior naturally cool in the blistering heat. Excavations even revealed built-in takeaway windows in market bakeries, basically the ancient equivalent of a fast food drive-thru. They even found clay cones they'd place out in the sun to act as sundials. All of this highly organized, standardized production fueled a massive international trade machine. They exported goods like timber, beautiful carnelian beads, ivory, their famous standardized weights, and most notably, cotton. Yeah, they were cultivating cotton 7,000 years ago, a concept totally foreign to Egypt and Mesopotamia at the time. They shipped these goods all across the ancient world, navigating the Persian Gulf to reach their trading partners. Their craftsmanship was so legendary that the famous Akkadian emperor in Mesopotamia, Sargon the Great, actually bragged about it. His translated clay tablet reads, "I had ships from Dilmun, Magan, and Meluha dock at the quay of Akkad." Meluha was the ancient Mesopotamian name for the Indus Valley. They were internationally recognized master engineers and traders. Which brings us to our final section, Part 6, the end of the engineers. Yet, despite all this brilliant engineering, this thriving metropolis of up to 100,000 people was ultimately abandoned. So where did they go? We have to look at the archaeological puzzles they left behind. In a city of potentially 100,000 people, excavators have only ever found 37 total skeletons. Strangely, 14 of those were clustered in a single location known as Room 74. Some of these skeletons were incomplete, missing lower halves or heads, and showed signs of injury. But because there are so few bodies overall, experts believe this points away from a sudden massive foreign invasion. Instead, the leading theories point to a gradual evacuation caused by environmental collapse. We're talking failing agricultural systems, shifting rivers, or catastrophic flooding that even their raised platforms just couldn't withstand over time. The population didn't just vanish. They likely dispersed across the region, taking their incredible culture and engineering skills with them. The city lay buried and completely forgotten by time. 5,000 years ago, the city peaked. It was later abandoned at an unknown date. Then, an incredible 2,000 years later, during the era of the Kushan kings, followers of Buddha completely unknowingly built a stupa, a religious dome to hold Buddhist ashes, directly on top of the ancient buried ruins of Mohenjo-Daro, literally building the present right on top of a forgotten past. It leaves us with a truly provocative thought to take away from this explainer today. Did the sheer force of the changing environment finally overpower their engineering limits? I mean, they mastered grid cities, they invented waterproofing, they created citywide sanitation and standardized economies. But no matter how perfectly a civilization engineers its cities, can it ever truly conquer the unpredictability of nature? It's a question that Mohenjo-Daro struggled with 5,000 years ago, and frankly one that our modern engineers are still trying to answer today. Thanks for joining me to unpack this fascinating source material. I really hope this sparked your curiosity to go learn even more about your ancient past.